Good evening. I'm going to call to order, this being May 28th, a meeting of the Committee of Infrastructure being held this Wednesday, again, May 28th, 2025, at 7 p.m. in the Automatic Chamber and duly noted in two places, including City Hall's website in accordance with requirements of RSA 91-A:2, Roman numeral 2. Can the clerk please take the roll?
Absolutely. Alderman Thibodeau?
Here.
Alderman Sullivan?
Here.
Alderman Clee is here. Alderman Dowd? And Alderman at Large O'Brien.
Present. I declare a quorum.
You have 4 members here.
Okay. Also in attendance is Mr. Tim Cummings, Administrative Service Director, Chief Stephen Buxton of the Nashua Fire Rescue, and Dawn Enright, I don't know if she's on.
No.
I do not see, but so we'll keep an eye out if she decides to join us. Okay, I'll open it up to public comment. Anybody have any information from the public? Seeing none, we'll move on to discussion of presentations on Fire Station Facilities Update, and I'll recognize Chief Buxton and Administrative Service Director, Mr. Tim Cummings.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. May we approach?
You may
and sit?
approach, have a
Thank you.
seat. They're much more comfortable than the benches. Commissioner, you want to join them? You may. Okay.
So as folks are getting settled here, for the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. I'm going to hand it off to Chief Buxton in 1 second, who's going to go into a little bit more detail than I am. But to just set the table here, if you recall, a little while back, we set money aside to do a master facility planning study, a deferred capital maintenance study, if you will. And this evening, I believe you're going to hear some of the findings and the work that was done over the last few months or so. The real genesis behind this conversation is because what I'm hoping to do as a follow-on to this conversation is to start to have a conversation with you all about developing a plan for funding the various maintenance needs. I have some ideas kind of sketched out in the back of my mind as to how to possibly accommodate it, but obviously, you know, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, and I welcome everyone's input here. So having that conversation as in follow-up to this, I think will behoove everyone, as we do want to be good stewards of the city's assets. So with that being said, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to hand it off to Chief Buxton and start the conversation in earnest.
Okay, Chief Buxton, please.
Thank you. Steve Buxton, National Fire Chief. So as you may remember, we went through the process to seek out a vendor to perform a facility study for us. We found some people far on the other side of the country, over in Seattle, that actually did the work for us. Assistant Chief Pouliot headed up the project. The city invested about $350,000 for this study. It's very comprehensive, and it gives us a good pathway forward to be able to follow for many years for the work we need to do to our facilities. Some of it is not a surprise to many of us, but some of the dollar amounts do add up to quite a bit. So I'll turn it over to Assistant Chief Pouliot. He's worked with these two ladies here and their team quite extensively over the past year to get this study done. So I'll let them take it away.
Okay, before you start, Chief, and to our guests, if you are asked to speak, can you just identify yourself, because you're new people and the transcription people may not know. So every time that you go to speak, state your name, and then it will be duly recorded. Chief Pouliot.
Good evening.
Thank you.
So thank you. As the chief said, a comprehensive study of our facilities. That includes all 6 of our firehouses, our fire alarm dispatch center, and our training grounds out of the landfill. So it covers 8 facilities. Focuses on the building itself, plumbing, electrical, HVAC needs, and a lot of focus on health and safety of our firefighters. Those are items like proper separation between apparatus space, living area, indoor air quality testing, things like that. So the study really covered pretty much every avenue of living in a fire station. And to present tonight, we have Sarah Partap from Meng Analysis and Sarah Gladix from Rice Fergus Miller.
Hi, thank you. I'm Sarah Partap from Meg Analysis. I want to start by just saying hello to everybody and thank you to Chief Buxton and Chief Pouliot for the
I'm
work.
going to ask if you could bring the microphone a little bit closer to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you to you guys for the support through this project. It was a large undertaking that required a lot of background information and support while we were on site. As they mentioned, it was a very extensive study. We had team members on site in every building, so they were heavily involved in the FCA and the planning process, so we appreciate your time. I was the project manager of kind of the overall project itself, and then also of the facility condition assessment portion. And I have Sarah Gladix with me. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi. Good evening. I'm Sarah Gladix. I'm a principal and fire station planner with Rice Fergus Miller Architects. And my job was to help manage and plan phase 2 of this project, which included understanding the way that you use all of your fire facilities and how we can implement change to make them better and more modernized, and to, as Chief Pouliot mentioned, ensure health and safety and wellness of firefighters now and into the future.
All right, Sarah Partap again. We might go back and forth.
Yeah,
We're going to go back and forth on some slides,
So we just keep,
That would be fine.
Okay. So this is just kind of an overview of what we were hoping to go through tonight in our agenda. We will be brief in some of these, so feel free to ask us questions at the end, and we can dive deeper into whatever topics you have questions about. So first,
Would you mind questions on topic as you're going through, or do you want to wait to the end?
either would be fine.
Whatever you're comfortable with, we
I
could go
would-
either way.
I think it's okay. If it starts to get to be like one and then another, then maybe we pause it till the end. So we
I
can
think we got a good group. I think they'll,
Yeah.
stay
Okay.
on focus. This is the best committee in the city here.
Oh, good.
so you-
Well, we're glad we're at this one then. All right, so we're going to start with just sort of the purpose of the project and the methodology. We will give you like high-level findings, sort of trends across the whole portfolio of buildings. Then we'll get into some specifics about each facility, and then summarizing the different types of costs and what those costs are toward the end. So the context for this project is the city and Nashua Fire Rescue has undergone additional preparatory work before doing this study. So in 2021, there was a master plan which reviewed, the fire service overall, station locations, and kind of laid out a big plan for the future. From that, you guys went into the strategic plan, which had specific items to follow up or how you're going to achieve this vision. And one of those was a facility study. So you can document all of your backlog of maintenance and move forward with decision-making for which to repair, which to replace, et cetera. So that's where we came in for the facility condition assessment. And then the long-range plan was the phase 2 of our project, which is taking the condition data and wrapping it into little digestible packages of what are your options for upgrading and repairing each station. So just a quick overview about the facility condition assessment process. We had a team of specialists that were from architectural, mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, structural engineer, and a civil engineer. And additionally, we had a firm who specializes in hazardous materials testing on board to do hazardous materials and air quality testing at select stations. The site assessments occurred in the summer of 2024. We were on site for about a week. We did one pilot in June, and then we were back on site in August to get through the rest of the stations. Some of the terminology that I'll use tonight: observed deficiencies. That's one that I'll use a lot. That's talking about issues that are either noted by our surveyors while they're on site, or they're disclosed to them. Say if it's a roof leak, but we were there in the summer, you guys could tell us there's a roof leak. We would note that. And they're things that need to be repaired within 5 years and that have a direct cost of at least $5,000. Our longer-term costs from the facility condition assessment are called predicted renewals, and that's more of like a statistical model of what we would expect you to need to pay based on your building types and the ages of the systems, what you would need to pay over 20 years across your whole building portfolio rolled up. So this year you need $1.2 million, this year you might need $5 million, so we forecast that out 20 years into the future.
Sarah Gladys from Rice Fergus Miller. The process that we use for Phase 2 starts with a needs assessment, which is asking you 1,000 questions, understanding what the department needs right now and what you envision you might need into the future, and what your overarching goals are for the department that also go hand in hand with the goals of the city. We conduct a handful of programming workshops, which we ask even more questions and get into kind of the high level and into the detail of each facility that we're looking into. And from that, we are able to prepare some diagrams that will help with a conceptual understanding of what your current facility is lacking and how we can make it better from a very high level. And then a square footage analysis, which helps us understand how much square footage do you have overall, what does each room have, and then it starts to show us what are the gaps in spaces that you don't have that you may need in order to house your equipment, make sure you have enough sleeping rooms for your firefighters, and then planning narratives, which are more written narratives that are useful for a professional cost estimator to take and start putting some conceptual dollars to each of these projects. And then that will inform what we think these conceptual cost estimates will look like, and not just hard costs, but soft costs or project costs, in other words, which are things like all FF&E items, so furniture, fixtures, and equipment. This will include architecture and engineering fees, permitting fees, utilities, estimates, things like that, so that you get a real round idea of what the project entails. And then we pull all that information together into a draft report, which is complete and awaiting comment, which will then get finalized and be ready for consumption. This slide here is just, again, a high-level understanding of what we're talking about when we are discussing needs assessment and diagramming. We go through what we call typical room diagrams, and these are all typical spaces of a fire station, of a modern fire station. And we'll go through and ask you questions about what you have now, what you think you might need in the future, what is the clearance required for that piece of equipment, does this meet your needs? And then we just go room by room and talk about every single thing you could possibly imagine on the wall, on the floor. And so these images are sort of the starting point for how we start to diagram, because these will translate directly into a box or a block, which then is used for conceptual diagramming.
All right, Sarah Partap from Meg Analysis. That was sort of our overview portion of like what we were doing and how we did it. So now we're going to get into common things that we saw across all the facilities. And then we'll go station by station and kind of give the high level portions of that. So for the facility condition assessment, one of the primary things we saw was issues with pavement. There's the freeze-thaw cycle here. There's heavyweight equipment going over them. So the pavement gets torn up, beaten up much more than other typical areas, and those can worsen over time. So that was consistent. There's alligatoring, there's potholes, things like that occurring at pretty much all the stations to various degree. Another common one that we saw was the stations, although people live there, it is like their home while they're on duty. But they're residential grade finishes in the kitchens, and although it's a residence, kind of, it gets a lot harder use than a typical residential. So it's with residential grade finishes, they just corrode over time. They get beaten up more than they would in a typical house. So, upgrading to commercial grade finishes that will last a lot longer. ADA accessibility is a challenge at every station. Sarah Gladys will get into that a little bit more detail later, but from the right-of-way getting into the building to navigating within the building, compliant door handles and door hardware, heights of drinking fountains, there's a lot of ADA issues throughout all the stations. Security, there's minimal security at most of the stations. There are some secured doors, but most stations may lack separation between public and private spaces. Parking is limited, and there's just general security challenges. And then one of the largest ones was mechanical controls. So there's the mechanical actual systems and the pieces of equipment like the chillers and the air handling units, and then there's the mechanical controls that program them all and tell them when to do what correctly. There's problems with both, but the mechanical controls were consistently needing a lot of, they're out of date. Some of them are not, they're not network controlled, so they can't be controlled from a single location. You have to go to each station and kind of try and fix it. So there's a lot of problems with the mechanical controls. And then probably the most significant from the FCA is the lack of dedicated maintenance staff. So we know that NFR right now, the firefighters and the employees are the ones who are responsible for doing a lot of the day-to-day troubleshooting kind of maintenance, and then the rest is performed by contractors, maintenance contractors, which one, are a lot more expensive, and two, have varying quality of work. Some are great, and some sort of just, check the box and don't do the best work. So there's a lot of issues that, because they don't get handled when they're small, they escalate to be much larger and much more expensive.
Sarah Gladix from Rice Fergus Miller. A handful of items that we found from a planning standpoint are, again, lack of ADA compliance throughout, lack of consistency in sort of modern or typical fire station spaces like bunker gear rooms, decontamination spaces, lacking some industry best practices, what we see for modern fire stations, and then lacking some space for both current and new technology and firefighter specialty equipment, and then inadequacies in your fire training facility and grounds. So ADA compliance, you can see just for example, getting to a basement only via stairs would provide no accessibility. A fire station is a public facility, therefore it is required to be held to the international business, or international, sorry, IBC, I'll just call it IBC. It is required to meet the intent of the code as far as a public facility using public dollars. And so there is no real workaround for compliance with ADA, but we do our best to make sure that it's that it makes the most sense for the function and the use of the occupants, but you still need to be able to get into a building or get to a second level or a basement, for example, and that is something that's lacking kind of throughout the portfolio. Inconsistencies with some of these spaces like bunker gear rooms and decontamination rooms is really important because we understand that decontamination helps prevent bloodborne pathogens from spreading throughout your station. It keeps your crews healthy. And that decontamination space is where you need to be able to wash all of your gear and handle specialty equipment. And bunker gear needs to be stored specifically, and it becomes degraded with UV light over time. And it also has harmful chemicals that are integral to the actual fabric of the bunker gear. And they should be separated after they've been used and cleaned and put into a room with a closed door. So things like that, not storing them in anywhere that's getting direct light, and also not storing them in the tub room, which is then getting diesel exhaust into your gear. Industry best practices, kind of a catch-all for a lot of things that we're seeing, trends within the industry. Gender equity and neutrality, such as having individual sleep rooms, which you do well in. I think all but Station 5 have individual sleep rooms, which is excellent. And then also having single occupant restrooms with shower. It just gives a little bit more autonomy to the firefighter when they're on shift, and some privacy, both acoustic, visual, and also individual temperature controls. So that's something that we pretty much across the board are always doing in a new fire station. That way each occupant of the space, especially during sleeping hours, can control if they want it warmer or cooler, they want natural light, they want artificial light. So blackout blinds and sleep room controls are very important. Non-porous surfaces, again, for bacteria, bloodborne pathogens, things like that, being able to be easily cleaned and maintained. Use of the tub room. Tub rooms should not be used for gathering or meeting of any kind. They should be used for a working space and should not have couches or chairs or tables for kind of congregating. And so we do see that across some of the stations, and I know it's a cultural thing, but we will raise awareness to the dangers of being in that space for longer than needed. And then staff parking, again, as Sarah mentioned, site security and site parking We really need to have adequate parking for shift change, so the number on shift times 2 would be how much parking you would want to have at every station, which could be a challenge at certain stations, but it's definitely something to consider. And then space, which can be, well, if it's decontamination space, extractors we see, in the tub room or kind of out in the open, we really want to get space dedicated for some of the specialty equipment that will help keep your gear maintained, keep folks cleaning the station. There's new technologies that are coming out, and we need to be able to think and future-proof for some of that equipment that may be coming or that already has come, but there's no room to implement into the facilities. And then just generally, your fire training, your drill grounds have a limited site availability, deteriorating infrastructure. The tower's been burned many times and needs to be replaced. And then there's just lacking of training objectives to meet the needs of the city.
All right, so that was, Sarah Partap from Ming Analysis. That was our kind of overview of the common trends throughout all the stations. So now we're going to dive a little deeper into individual stations and facilities and their specific needs. So we'll just go in order, starting with Fire Station 1, which is Amherst Street. The way we'll do this is I'll just cover quickly some of the top FCA-related issues, so actual issues with the building besides the programmatic issues, and then Sarah Gladix will talk through the programmatic ones. So Amherst Street Station, that was that staircase photo, I believe, that Sarah showed on her ADA slide. That station, one of the primary issues is moisture intrusion. The photo I'm showing here is just an example of the downspout not being directly connected to the groundwater drainage system, and it's right over a crack. So there's moisture intrusion that's coming down into the basement, which causes erosion and can cause mildew and things like that. Because this is your oldest station, it has a lot of hazardous materials. It predates all the laws that say what you can and can't put in a facility like this. So, there is asbestos, there's lead paint, there's several noted hazardous materials there. And then the third big issue I wanted to highlight was just end-of-life HVAC equipment. So in this case, it's equipment and controls, I believe. But just, boilers and things like that, they might last, if you upkeep them well, 20 years, and then they just need to be replaced. So these are at end of life.
And as far as programmatic deficiencies, there's not a dedicated decontamination room. There's not dedicated bunker gear storage that isn't in the tub room on the walls. There is not sufficient office space, which would include a firefighter work area, so kind of after-action reviews or debriefs, report writing, things like that. We're lacking space for those, and then lack of private single-occupant restrooms.
Sarah Partap again. So Station 2, Lake Street Station. This one, an interesting problem. The way the roof is configured is when ice and snow melt, it kind of all converges in a single point, which happens to be right over the entry. So if there's large snow or ice melt, it can, obviously get moisture on people that are coming in, but the ice could actually fall, onto somebody who is coming through that door. There's floor corrosion from, I believe, probably the hydronic piping in the flooring. And then again, HVAC, the problem with this one is the boilers themselves are at end of life and have been failing and have had fixes and patches and things like that, but they're needing to be replaced now.
Programmatically, site parking is an issue there. We know there's a through road that goes right through the parking area for staff and public parking. And so that needs to be addressed. There's no dedicated kitchen space for the admin since it is now headquarters, so level 1 off of the public parking is where firefighter administration is currently located, and they don't have the proper accessory spaces for that use. It is a relatively new station by fire station standards. And so it's been well maintained. There's a lot of good happening. So we only really recommend converting some space in the living quarters at the fire station side for single occupant restrooms, and the rest is in pretty good shape.
Okay, Station 3, which is Spitbrook Road. This is actually the pilot facility that we did, so our first station that we assessed. End-of-life roof, the roofs are a problem throughout all the stations, but this one in particular, this one is additionally challenging because just accessing the roof, you have to go out through a window. There's not built-in, roof hatches, so it's not easy to access. And when a roof is not easy to access, it means that you're not maintaining it as frequently, so your roof drains can get clogged with tree debris, then water ponds on the roof, and then you develop a roof leak over time. So having convenient and safe roof access is an important thing to consider in any fire station, any building really. And then the boiler and heat pumps at this one are also nearing end of life.
From our perspective, this also has a parking challenge, and that's something we addressed in the planning. There's just not enough parking spaces, especially for shift change. And then this station, actually, they had an addition, so a new tub room was put in not that long ago, which enabled them to include a secondary bunker gear storage room, and so they've got two instead of one larger single room. And this is a station in particular where folks are gathering in the tub room, and that space could be very well utilized for a dedicated decontamination room, as the extractor just sits in the tub room out in the open. So there's some great things at that station, and then there are a few challenges that could be fairly easily solved.
All right, next is Station 4, Crown Hill Station. This one is the newest in the portfolio. I believe it's from 2006 or thereabouts. 2008, thank you, Sarah. And this one, of all the stations, we think this one probably has the worst HVAC issues, even though it's the newest. The picture you're seeing here is of the hydronic heating system, and I'm not a mechanical engineer, so don't ask me detailed questions about this. But essentially, it's a hot water piping system that goes throughout the building, and that's what's used to heat the building. And the water in that system should be clear water. That water is obviously not clear. It's got oil in it. There's a lot of, pinprick leaks that are starting to happen within the system. And we're guessing that probably the system wasn't completely flushed during the construction time. Once they install it, there should be a full flush. And if that didn't occur, it can lead to problems over time. The water quality issues will corrode the pipes, leading to those small little leaks. So that's what you're seeing there.
Yes, since it is a newer station, there's a lot that is working really well. I would say the biggest challenge is that it was formerly where headquarters was before it went to Station 2, and so there is a lot of unused sort of public and/or administrative spaces in the front of the station, and so being able to better utilize that and get the fire marshals some additional space, as well as maybe a true reception and administrative office space, and some storage will help that, help solve those problems. And then there isn't really what we would consider a true decontamination room. It's sort of utility catch-all space that happens to have some decontamination in it. So there's a few minor things that can be updated from a programmatic standpoint.
All right, Station 5, Pine Hill Road Station is the next one. This one overall, the building, I think everybody knows the building of this one is essentially at end of life, but just some issues that we'll highlight. Hazardous materials. Again, this is one that has a fair amount of hazardous materials. The photo you're seeing there, the black squares on the floor are where tiles have become loose, and so that's the black adhesive that you're seeing, which is an asbestos-containing material. And asbestos, when it's not touched and it's intact, it's okay, you still don't want it, but it's not going to do any harm. But when it becomes airborne and friable from people walking over it and picking up particles, as you can assume that's happening here because it's a floor, that is not good. This station also has pretty poor ventilation. I believe the upstairs, there's no cooling, it's just windows. So, and a lot of their ventilation comes through operable windows instead of mechanical systems doing it. And the roof, this is another one with the end-of-life roof.
This one, as you can see by my little paragraph there, it is deficient in almost all programmatic elements that would make a functioning and healthy fire station. That's just beyond the hazmat issue that we have, but, fitness is happening in the tub room where, that is a dirty space, and so you shouldn't be working out in there. no dedicated anything as far as operational decontamination room, bunker gear storage. And then sleeping quarters, it is the only facility that does not have individual sleep rooms and restrooms. And so it doesn't provide any privacy of any kind for any of the crews to have adequate and healthy sleep. So what we did was discuss during the needs assessment and workshops, what would a new Station 5 on Pine Hill Road look like? Is it feasible to remodel what you have? Sure, but let's think bigger and let's think into the future. What does the city need and what does the fire department need? And that's where we've landed is enabling a new station to be discussed and planned that also houses a citywide EOC and emergency management, which is a really excellent use of a public facility to put in several entities. And you've got the room for it, and you can do it single story, which was fun to figure out because all of your stations are more than one story currently. So it was a great exercise to find out, how many sleep rooms will you need? What other accessory spaces would you need to handle more recruitment and retention, and what can you provide your current firefighters on staff, as well as who do you want to bring in the future, and how do we make that happen? So just understanding the goals, understanding the needs, and this is where we have come conceptually.
Sorry.
You're good.
Okay, next, Station 6, Conant Road. This one, again, it has an end-of-life roof, and it's hard to get on the roof. Not great ventilation. This is kind of funny. Our mechanical guy was out there, and he was talking to one of the firefighters who's like, oh, no, we have a ventilation. We have a ceiling fan. And we're like, well, I mean, yeah, that moves the air around, but, actual exhausting ventilation to get clean outside air into the building. The cooling unit there is undersized, so it can't really perform for the full cooling load that's needed at this building. And then this one is unique because it has the fire station and it also has the mechanics area, the shop. And the heating system is connected. So there's like a single control for the fire station half and the shop half, which the shop half, they might have more doors open. They have different needs than the building that's sort of left alone. So decoupling those heating and cooling systems would be a priority.
This station also, I believe it's had several kitchen remodels, all of which are residential grade, and the use and abuse of firefighters in kitchens and materials finishes is understood, and I think that would be a priority, is getting in some commercial grade appliances. There is no real lobby or obvious entrance, which I think from a public standpoint is, you want to make sure someone knows where they're going to go if they were going to have an emergency or they needed to stop by. Also for security purposes, so that's something that we looked into when talking about needs and assessing what that program might look like. Decontamination and bunker gear, they're a little muddy there. I think that we need some true spaces, some true separation, and maintenance bays certainly need better storage, both interior storage and exterior storage, and they're woefully lacking in their very small living quarters and office space.
All right, the fire alarm building, this one, I believe it has a heated floor, through piping embedded in the floor, which is hard to replace because it's embedded in the floor, but there's issues with that, so that's going to require some repairs. The roof is at end of life, again, mechanical controls, and this one houses a data center, which generates a lot of heat, so there should be a dedicated cooling system in the data center just to keep it from overheating and failing.
A couple fairly major items at this facility is ADA compliance. Again, I mean, we said that on both phase 1 and phase 2, ADA compliance is an issue. This one in particular, and I say it very gently, but this is not a station. This is not for firefighters. This is for fire alarm and dispatches located there. And you could certainly have a dispatcher who has mobility issues, and there is no way currently to get a person up and into the dispatch room. So that is an issue that needs some kind of resolution. And that's important because you want to make sure that you're able to have folks, who are wheelchair bound or otherwise have mobility issues able to enter and or work in the space. Generally, just inadequate office space for the staff members that are working out of there. And there is no real ability to expand that facility because of the small site that is already too small and there's already not enough parking. So it's a tough one. It'd have to be a very light touch remodel in order to not trigger major code compliance upgrades.
Okay, and then our final one is the drill yard. So some of the condition issues, obviously the building is a burn building, so we did write some of that up, but we're not going to talk about that because that is the intent. It's supposed to be beaten up and burned. But the site itself had some issues. One, the type of pavement that's out there is not strong enough for the apparatus that are going back and forth on it, so it is corroding faster. And then the drainage is not great. So in the winter, you can see there, this is the summer, there's a puddle there where they're releasing many, many, many gallons of water, and then it becomes icy and it's dangerous to drive. Additionally, there's no permanent training building out there, so no restrooms or showers, so they don't have an opportunity to clean up before they get back in the truck and go back to their station.
And at this current site, not currently where the Connex tower is located, but elsewhere at the landfill, there's an opportunity for potentially about 4 acres of development for a new training and drill grounds. So we use that footprint to discuss mostly with Chief Pouliot and Captain Nielsen with training to find out what are the objectives for training? What does the city of Nashua need as far as different types of response? What are the props that you might want? And so we went really in depth with the training program and ended up, a training site is always going to be very large and very expensive. So thinking about it from a phased approach, we felt confident that you could get a lot of the infrastructure put into place and some facilities on the site in phase 1, and then down the road, as more funding becomes available, you could really outfit it with all the different props and urban search and rescue, confined space training options, hazmat. But for phase 1, it would really focus on what you need now, an outdoor classroom, a covered area with restrooms so you can train outdoors during all kinds of weather. Relocating the existing Connex burn tower to that site, using the site topography in order to do some wildland, potential wildland training. So just, that was a fun one. There's a lot of really fun stuff you can do at the training site. And I think it would be very beneficial to not only the city and the fire department, but the region.
Okay, so that was sort of the end of the station-by-station analysis, and now more getting into the planning portion of the evening.
Yeah, just a couple of things. We discussed in one of our first initial meetings or workshops, what does the future of Nashua look like, and what does that do for response times, and are there developments coming right now or coming in the future where you're going to need to expand the service area, or is the response times are going to get a little too long from your current stations? So what we did was just come up with, what would like a satellite station be, or a smaller station that could go, maybe nearby a new school or other new developments in the city, maybe on the outskirts that don't have the greatest response times. So we just came up with a prototype that would meet those needs and then be easily adaptable at any time in the future if chosen. And we also did the same kind of exercise with fire alarm, discussing those needs again and diagramming, what is the space required, what are you missing right now in your current facility. You can ignore the site image on the right, but what we do is we use that as a test to fit, and we figure out, how much acreage might you need in order to accommodate the size of the facility and the associated parking requirements. So we went in depth with fire alarm and the folks there and got their feedback to figure out what does the future fire alarm facility need to look like.
All right, so now getting a little bit into some of the costs for some of these pieces. Sarah Gladys will cover most of this, but we wanted to call out a few things up front. One is about the level of detail of the cost estimates that we're providing. So from the facility condition assessment, there is a lot of those short-term and long-term deficiency costs, the predicted renewal costs. These are rough estimates sort of to plan your budget. So rough order of magnitude, is it a $10,000 project or is it a $100,000 project? But we're not giving you, is it a $10,000 versus a $12,060 project? So it's really kind of planning purposes, not a full estimate. And an important thing we've mentioned kind of throughout is extensive repairs can trigger code compliance upgrades. So with the facility condition assessment, if by some way you were able to fund all of the deficiencies in a single station, like we're gonna make all the repairs they suggested over the next 5 years, it's likely gonna be a significant enough of an investment that it would trigger a full code compliance upgrade, which would bring in, hazmat remediation, ADA compliance, it would bring in a lot. So the costs can grow quite quickly if you are required to do a full compliance upgrade. And then getting into the LRFP, the long-range facility plan costs, those are more, they're taking our costs from the FCA and rolling those into a larger project cost. So the facility condition assessment costs are sort of the intro-level budget planning, and then the long-range costs will include, like Sarah said, soft costs, like your internal costs of doing business, the design fees, permitting fees. They try to make their best guess at all in, what are these things going to cost?
Some additional considerations on cost, timing and escalation. If you know anything about the construction industry, you know that escalation and the economy are really big factors in the cost of materials and goods, the cost of construction, and timing is really important because when you're adding in 4.5% escalation, which could change, it could be higher, it could be lower, that's just going to make it, it's always going to be more expensive if you do it later. Not because anything changes, but because escalation will change and the costs of things increase over time. And it's also good to understand the timing of a project. For example, a new fire station, on average, is going to take about a year to design and get through permitting, and it's going to take about a year to 18 months to build. That's fairly typical, can be slightly different depending on the size and the scale of the facility or any complexities. Also, customary 10% estimating and design contingency. That contingency goes down as you have more knowns. So when you're early on in schematic design, for example, you're going to have a higher contingency. And then as you get towards construction documents and well into your bid sets, your contingency is going to continue to go down because more things have been figured out. And then in the case of today, we have added quite a bit of additional contingency to these projects just to capture any unknowns. You want to go in and ask for as much money as you think that it may cost plus some, so that you're not going back out and oh, we forgot this or we didn't account for that. So we try to be really conservative with our estimating to make sure that you are covered.
Can I chime in right here?
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm going to just naturalize this a little bit because I get very sensitive at this as typically the person who's up before you that has to explain the various project costs. I tend to want to make sure we're very clear on this. So the 4.5 escalation, I think that's low. I would carry more something like 10% for year-over-year escalation just by the New England market being the way it is. And that's what we currently carry, just so everyone knows, for projects to be safe. Relative to the estimating design contingency, we typically carry 15%. And I want to be clear, this contingency is reduced as a design contingency, but we have two other contingencies that we always carry as well, an owner's contingency and a general contractor's contingency. Those contingencies are on top of this contingency. So I just want to make sure that that's kind of understood. And then we're carrying anywhere between 1% and 5% for tariffs and various, inflationary factors right now on our projects based on what we're hearing and seeing in the marketplace, and that's obviously evolving.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's great. A few other things to consider related to cost are delivery methods. So a traditional design, bid, build delivery method is usually the cheapest, which means all of your documentation is done, and then you go out and hard bid it on the street, and you take the lowest, what do they call it? The lowest responsible bidder. And then you can also do alternative delivery methods, which are becoming a lot more popular. Things like CMGC, construction manager, general contractor, or design build or progressive design build. They're all very great methods in their own way. I would say alternative delivery methods can be a little more expensive on the front end, but you're bringing in your contractor early to help solve any design issues with the architect and engineers from the beginning. And so there are pros and cons, but you can anticipate some higher costs with some of these different methods. And also considerations for an owner's representative. A small project may not need it, but you need someone to be able to manage the work, the project, the contractor, the architect. So we like to add in some contingency or allowance in your soft costs for an owner's representative for the project if needed. And just an overview for the new stations that are part of the Phase 2 long-range plan. All new facilities are just, one conceptual design option and an estimate. The training grounds, as mentioned, has a Phase 1 and a Phase 2 component. And then each remodel, based on the needs assessment, the remodels that were determined have several different options. Just to give you an overview of what you could expect from, more of the FCA data that Sarah and her team come up with. If you're going to address more deficiencies and opportunities, it's going to be more expensive. If you do all of the planning work that Phase 2 represents, it's going to be more expensive. So we tried to break it out so you get a little bit of a different idea of the opportunities. So option A, mostly correcting all deficiencies and opportunities being created. And then really the biggest component there is full planning. So option A is going to have everything necessary from the Phase 1 FCA data, everything from Phase 2, and it's also going to take into account upgrades needed. Option B is kind of like one tier down. So maybe like option A is best, and then better is option B, which would be, some light refresh to the spaces, getting new paint, new materials. You're not getting any new programming, no new walls, but you're getting something. And then you're also getting the priority items that are deficient based on the FCA. And those would be replaced in kind. So that will help keep the costs down, and you hopefully can avoid triggering a full code compliance upgrade. And then option C is basically just no planning. You're not changing anything within the station except for when it comes to systems and infrastructure and things that are deficient with the building itself and its necessary systems. So this is where I start to talk about big millions. And I like to say big millions because it all feels kind of like it's not real. Like fire stations are very expensive. They need to be held to a higher structural consideration than other facilities. They're also public facilities. And those come with hefty price tags. These are all conceptual costs, and they are also, there is a high contingency involved, but we wanted to make sure that when we're talking about what your needs are, we're covering them all and more. And Tim may, Tim may disagree. I think we have different numbers, but this is just giving you kind of an idea of what you can expect when you read through the final draft of Phase 2 report. And so we're going through and we're indicating visually what the hard construction costs are, what the soft project costs could be, and then what that total looks like. So if you were going to say we're going to do all of these new facilities, it's probably about $100 million, give or take. It's probably less, but again, being very conservative, we're going to estimate a little higher because it's safer in this economy. And then again, just another visual of what you can expect in the report is going through station by station for remodels and then indicating what those option A, B, and C, kind of that good, better, best scenario might look like. And so of course it varies because you could pick all option C and then you're going to be on the lower end, or you could pick all option A, or you can do a mix. So there's kind of a range there of what you're looking at. And this is just showing kind of some behind the scenes, like when we're going through and we're indicating, you know, what projects could look like. It could be a remodel, it could be a new station, and in this case, we're just giving examples of what it would look like to do re-roof and HVAC projects on all of the existing facilities. So that's also an option, is to kind of pick and choose and select projects based on priority for the fire department and for the city.
So now getting into recommendations in the short term, you guys, I believe, have probably already heard some of this information, but, you know, sort of decided the department has identified a few priorities. The first one is, again, working through all those HVAC issues with equipment and controls across the department. Repairing or replacing as many roofs as possible across the department. And then the new Pine Hill Road Station, Station 5, which the feasibility study for that is beginning soon. Those are the kind of the identified priorities. And then getting into the next steps, we're essentially done with our work for this project. It's more just kind of finalizing any comments, answering questions from you guys, but the facility condition assessment report is complete, just unless there's any final comments or edits. The long-range plan is similarly complete, just if there's any final comments or edits. So both of those deliverables would be formalized as the final version. And then just, you know, being here ongoing to answer questions as you kind of get into it. And then obviously the feasibility study for the Pine Hill Road Station is going to be beginning soon. So that was kind of the end of what we wanted to tell you, and we're happy to answer questions. Yes?
All right, well, I'll recognize Alderman Clay.
Thank you. I don't think that it's anything that we weren't surprised to hear. I think Chief Buxton and previous chiefs have been kind of telling us that this has been happening, and something we need to address and have needed to address for a long time. And those, the things that you told us at the end, obviously, are something we need to look at first and make our priority and so on. But something that you kept talking about parking and so on. How would you address something like parking in a place that there's only so much
Right.
land? So how would you address something?
That's a great question.
I mean, you're kind of landlocked.
Yeah.
You can't exactly like mow down somebody's home just so
Right,
that you
right.
have
In
6
some
more
ins-
parking spaces.
Yeah, in some instances, that's true. I mean,
I mean, I'm thinking of the
fire
Amherst
alarm.
Street parking. Yeah.
Right, yeah, Amherst Street and fire alarm, I mean, you're kind
Yeah.
of just, you deal with what you can deal with, and that's that. But in terms of, you know, Station 2, Lake Street Station, or Station 3, Spitbrook Road, there are opportunities for additional parking. And so in our planning documents, which are in the final report, you can see where, you know, we're indicating there is additional site area that can accommodate. Sometimes it's just a matter of a couple of parking stalls, but there are opportunities at several of the stations to accommodate more parking. But yeah, there are that are not.
Just-
Follow up?
Yeah, thank you. So those 4 items that you talked about, like the HVAC and so on, roofs, so within that report, do you actually break those down and kind of talk to address those particular things rather than the entire wish list? I mean, and I say a wish list, and I don't mean that it's a wish list, because in truth, it's something that's honestly needed. And I'm not belittling anything, honestly, I'm not. HVAC is important. We talked about it here in City Hall. You know, we want the firefighters to have something more than, I want them to have heat. I want them to have everything that they need. I want our equipment not to fall through the floor. You know, I want our equipment to be housed, I want our, you know, men and women to have the facilities and so on, so.
I think Sarah, yeah, she can address that directly on the screen here.
Yeah, so tonight, we didn't want to get too into the details because I could go on for many hours. So
Yeah,
we kind of just want to give you the
we're talkers.
overview. But in the report, that's so from the FCA, there was two primary deliverables. There was an executive summary report, which presented more of the department-wide trends and issues that we were seeing and more about the methodology. And then there's the very detailed report, which goes through, you know, system by system within each building and describes what type of roof it is, what we would score it on a 1 to 5 scale, 5 being completely failed, 1 is excellent and usually within warranty period. So there's a lot of 3s. Except Station 5, there's a lot of 4s, and probably some 5s. And then those individual observed deficiencies, each one that meets that threshold of, we feel it needs to be addressed within a 5-year period and has a direct cost of at least $5,000. Those are written up as this page I'm showing here, as just an individual deficiency. So if you wanted to go through and like kind of pick and choose just individual spot issues, like let's just talk about the boiler and the controls at this station, you can look into that and see a more detailed description of the issue and the cost related to it.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did, thank
Okay.
you.
Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you. But first, a comment. Oh, my God.
Which part?
Kind of the whole thing. I know that, you know, we're looking at we have a bonding resolution for tomorrow night, which I would assume is part of this.
Yes.
It's going to cross some items off the list. Kind of wish we had seen this before we started the budget conversation, but it is what it is. If you could, in your professional opinion, I'd love to know a letter grade across all 8 stations and facilities that we have. Just, whatever. I mean, you don't have to go in, you know, you're a hard grader, you're an easy grader. I mean, I don't know. I mean, your professional opinion, I mean, what do you think the grade of our overall NFR facilities are in the city of Nashua?
It's a solid C.
I was going to say also a C.
Average.
C average.
Average,
Sure.
there, you know,
Well, C is an average grade.
yeah. So a
Okay.
5, you know, Station 5 is particularly,
Yeah.
yeah. Station
driving
five,
the-
Yes.
Right now.
And then other stations, like, you know, like I highlighted at Station 4, there's this significant HVAC issue, but that's a new station, so, you know, the way it's been planned, the way it's laid out, doesn't need a lot of changing. So although some of them will have a major issue that needs to be taken care of, overall, they're still okay. Both of our firms do a lot of work related to fire and emergency services, so we've seen a lot of different fire stations, a lot in the Pacific Northwest, and they have a lot of similar issues. And, you know, we also do a lot of work just with cities and counties and assessing their municipal buildings. Nobody ever has the money to fund their buildings. You know, it's more fun to like build a new building, but a lot of times it's forgotten about how much effort and time and cost it really takes to maintain a building once you have it. It's not like maintaining your house, it's a lot more. So it's not an uncommon position to be in, even though it can seem a bit overwhelming.
And I think another point too is the deferred maintenance is probably the number one item just across the board. I think that, and I think part of the slide of, you know, no dedicated maintenance staff, I mean, that is a huge hindrance, because if you were able to maintain all of these facilities from when they were built and then, you know, treat them that way through their life cycle, then you'd have different stations standing today. Some of it is as simple as, you know, maybe 15 years ago you should have replaced the carpet, or maybe it, you know, it's like things just start to fail, and then when you defer maintenance, the overall quality of the facility just starts to degrade. And Sarah's right. I mean, the firm that I work for, we've been planning and designing fire stations and other fire and emergency services facilities for 30 years. So I've been in a lot of fire stations, a lot of them, and you're not unique. It's not like when I say a C, that's bad. It's pretty average. And you have a lot of older facilities compared to, you know, the West Coast, where we see a lot more newer architecture. So, C.
And those older facilities, they come with a lot of constraints relative to parking, but just what you can do for ADA compliance. You know, we kind of,
Accessibility, yeah, absolutely.
there's minimal things you can do. So in some ways, you know, you're doing your best, but
Right.
it's not always going to work.
I'm kind of smirking because the fire alarm building was Lake Street Station, engine and ladder 2, with the crew of 6 people. So that means 12 people at shift change. We got by. You know what I mean? There's firemen, if there's a will, there's a way. That's why we pay them like that. I'm going to right now recognize Director Cummings. He had something. So Alderman Thibodeau, you're in the queue right immediately after. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. I did just want to note that a couple months back, we've started a conversation about enhancing our facilities department. And so I've been before the Budget Review Committee, and I've been before the Personnel and Administrative Affairs Committee, and I anticipate a continuing conversation with an idea of us increasing our asset management, our stewardship of our capital buildings. We need to maintain them in a more strategic way because it will save us money in the long run. Great picture that was shown at the kickoff of this presentation was the drains not connected at the firehouse. You know, the goal that I've espoused is I'd like to get a maintenance team in and around our city buildings, including fire, to steward those buildings and the systems the way they should be. Because if we can squeak more life out of our systems, it will save us money in the long run. And so I say that because I recognize the need. And I believe we're working towards a solution. It's not happening as quickly as I would like, but I brought this up at a couple of my budget presentations, and more recently at my last Buildings and Grounds, seeking approval on that department's budget. But I'm hoping, you know, come FY '27 in our next budget, we will have, you know, a better baked plan that everyone buys into, so we're handling these buildings in a more efficient way. Can we go back to that recommended slide? Because I want to just quickly address a couple of the items that were raised as priority projects. So, yep. So it was noted a few minutes ago. There is a bond resolution up, I believe, tomorrow night that's going to actually address item number 2. And then I believe also anticipated with that is some HVAC work as well. So priorities 1 and 2, we're starting developing a pathway forward. So we're managing these assets. And then, you know, as noted, we actually have money appropriated, set aside. I believe we will be, you know, kicking into higher gear the feasibility study come this summer, with it anticipated ending in and around January. My thought process at that time is, and this is all subject to change, is then we would be seeking you know, an appropriation, a bond resolution for design, and we would start designing the Pine Hill Station. Once we have that understood better, then we would obviously seek approval for construction. This is all baked into the overall comprehensive conversation that we've been having as a community about what our appropriate level of debt service should be, and making sure these various projects fit within our capital plan. I think after tonight's conversation, we owe it to this body and to the fire commissioners to internally discuss how we fit the puzzle pieces together, knowing the policy directive has been that the city of Nashua doesn't want to authorize any more new debt than about approximately $20 million year over year over the next 5 years. So knowing that, how do we make that work with the needs that the fire department have, as well as all the other needs of the city? And that's very much forefront in my mind, and one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of start that conversation this evening. Thank you.
Alderman Thibodeau.
So I understand that it's a, you know, not a firm number, but your estimation was 102 million, if I remember correctly. That included the escalator.
Yes, that information is for new facilities only. It does not include the remodels. And so that, basically, it's a range of, I guess, let me back up a little bit. because I feel like maybe it's addressing multiple questions or comments here. This information is essentially a menu. You know, it's for you to consider and take our professional opinion and the data and the needs assessment, and then pick and choose what is of most importance to the city and the fire department. So that's why I'm saying like big millions. It's make believe. Like it doesn't. Nobody's going to get 100 million or 150 million to do anything ever. But this is just the information that it puts a period at the end of the report that says these are all of your opportunities and deficiencies, both from a building standpoint, infrastructure systems, and programmatic relative to industry best practices. So this is sort of this is the answer that everybody gets at every meeting that we have like this at the end of a project. It's these kinds of numbers. I mean, some of them are like $200, $300 million, because you're just talking all in if we were going to do everything. But I just want to stress that these numbers are just representative of every single thing that we've asked and we've heard that were needed or doesn't work and needs to be fixed or replaced. So the numbers aren't real. I don't want to say the numbers aren't important, but the numbers don't really mean anything until you actually make them a project.
Say that again.
The numbers don't really matter. They only matter when you choose to make it a project.
I can't stress that point enough. I'm very uncomfortable with some of these numbers because we latch onto them.
Right, and
And
it's
then
not
this
a
is
big
the number that you say to me, oh, we're going to do the project for this amount. I'm going to tell you right now, we are not doing a new station number 5 for $30 million. Just, I hate to say it, but we can't do anything for $30 million for new construction.
Right.
That's just the reality of our marketplace. There's a lot that needs to be further designed and figured out before we hone in on the number, but I would say that is a good jumping off point, that to set expectations, it's not going to be anything lower than this. And that's just what we need to kind of understand.
Right, and that's, it just really is it's the culmination of all of the information that we've been able to process. So, go ahead.
Follow up?
Yeah, so that kind of answered where I was heading. So, and I get it. So my point was going to be, if we're talking 102 that had your combined 12 escalator in there.
The
Direct-
escalator is included. Everything.
That
this
is included
would
in
be
your
all-
number.
Yeah, absolutely.
Correct.
And that, it's 2 years of escalation, so it's 9%, which of course we can adjust. but-
Understood. My point was gonna be that Director Cummings was suggesting that it's probably gonna be 25 to 30% on top of that. And now that this isn't even the full lot, I guess I didn't pick up on that, that was just the new items. So if we went with, from the menu and picked all our favorite flavors of all the menu items, I mean, we're probably talking almost $400 million.
We have got to talk, because I don't know where you're getting your numbers, and you don't know where I'm getting but I'm very curious about.
Right. And
Some of
and
the
that's
things
kind of
that
what I
are
was looking for, was just,
Right.
are we talking, I get it, big numbers, I get it. But if there was any conversation that had happened that, if we really want the best of what's on the menu, are we approaching the 300, the 250, the 400 ballpark?
His answer is going to be yes, and mine's going to be no.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends.
Sure.
It really depends. I mean, it's so amorphous at this point because there's so many details that need to be worked out. And I don't know enough yet to comment more than that, but I mean, I tend to shy away from commenting on deferred capital maintenance, this whole side of the ledger, because this is really specific and really complicated. The new construction, I feel much more confident talking about. I mean, and I don't know what square footage, and we could just go back to, station number 5, the new station number 5 at $30 million. I don't know what they're projecting for square footage, right? And then what the,
25,000.
so 25,000 square feet, and you're projecting what for per square foot, $500-ish?
For fire
Yeah,
station,
and I
it's
can tell you-
usually more like 7.
And I'm gonna tell you right now, we're 1,000.
Yeah.
So that's just a jumping off point, and that's hard construction without even talking about soft costs. So at 25,000 square feet right there, you're going to be at $25 million, and I'm going to tell you to add another 10 for soft costs on top. That puts you at $35 million. That's just the ball game that we're talking about. So we kind of need to talk through the details a little bit more, but that's just our market.
And it's 10% cheaper here in New England than it is on the West Coast. That's, it's wild.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Chief Buxton.
Yeah, I'd like to, Steve Buxton, National Fire. I'd like to thank them for their work. It was a great presentation. As you can see, it's very comprehensive, and this is just kind of a high-level view for you tonight. Adam's going to be the one that's driving this within our organization. This was kicked off because of a master plan that we invested in for the fire department that laid things out for approximately 10 to 15 years. We've done 3 of those at Nashua Fire throughout the years. They're all stacked up on the bookshelf in there. Some of them were done, and they went on the bookshelf, and really not a whole lot ever happened with them. I'm proud to say this master plan that we did in 2021 and this strategic plan, I have in my office, Chief Rhodes before me, myself, and we go through and we update it when we're checking boxes off. This facility study was laid out in there to be done. This is just another roadmap for us to follow into the future. I agree with Director Cummings. I don't want to say don't get hung up on the cost, but until we actually turn it into a project, that's where we come looking for money. And I think the fire department does a really good job of working with the members of the Board of Aldermen, the mayor, to find our place in line, so to speak. We recognize the pie is only so big, so $100 million is a really big pie, really big piece of the pie. And at the end of the day, somebody has to manage all this within our organization. And that guy right down there, he does a really good job, but facilities is just one part of his area of responsibility. So if you let me walk out of here tonight with $100 million to attack all this, we don't have the bandwidth to accomplish it at the end of the day. So, but as you heard, the priority items are already on the radar, and I'll be back here tomorrow night to speak to the bonds that we're looking to get that work started. So, thank you.
Yeah, I would like to say thank you, Chief. In my involvement with the department of over, for 35 years, a lot of these stations weren't built. We have 2 that are fairly modern, and even they have some problems, due to lack of maintenance and everything. But a lot of these are very old structures. I don't know, the ethic or the new way of the fire service has changed. We got rid of the horses years ago, So we have motorized apparatus, so stations can be farther apart because horses don't have to run that far anymore, And, we actually invented the toilet, so, things are working out good. But the thing is, the main thing is, and you guys are on the infrastructure committee, you've seen it here before, past boards ignored a lot of these problems. Engine 5 was built in 1961. It was built cheaply in 1961. Construction's good, the place hasn't fallen down, but it's small, cramped, everything. I was captain of the house there. The guys are working out on the same floor that the truck is on. And when the truck starts off, you do get some byproducts of the combustion of the engine, and it stays in there. And I don't know, Chief Pouliot, did you take them to the former Crown Hill Station?
Did not.
Can you please, because I was captain of the house there, please look at that, you will say, they lived here? Because I went there and worked there and said, God, it was bad. My first night at Lake Street Station, I slept there, it was in the middle of winter time, and I couldn't sleep because the shades, the wind was coming right through the window, and the shades flipping in the breeze all night. And that just didn't happen the day before. It's the years of neglect until finally they got somebody to do this. We got to, as a city, and I'm saying this overview, not just the fire department, but every single facility, look at, we almost have 2 parking garages that could collapse. But we're working to, smartly so, and I compliment the mayor and Director Cummings for prioritizing some of these things. I know it's going to cost the taxpayers some money, but it's their buildings, and they look at us to try to maintain them the best way that we can. And out of all the facilities that we have, the one thing to remember with the fire department, people live in them. They leave their nice cushy homes and their lazy boys at home, and they go to the fire station, So the facilities, particularly the mail facilities and everything else like that, and now in the fire service, they have come out with, right, Chief, with more rules of contamination. When I started, they gave you 1 fire coat. And if it got wet at a fire and you were going out to your second one, you wore the wet coat. It's the way it was. We were tougher back then, but anyways, Not like today, but I'm only kidding, Chief. But it was the way it was, because the city didn't want to buy, and they think now, what, we're buying 2 sets of gear? And we have to meet the standards of the NFPA and everything. So as far as the living facilities, I think we as a committee, if we focus, this is a lot, and I'm sure, and you stated that. I don't think we have to bite it off in one bite and chew it. I think what we need to do as a committee is sit down with Chief Buxton, Director Cummings, and Chief Pouliot, and try to prioritize this. And I'm thinking we're talking to Bond tomorrow night, and I think that's a good launching point to see if we're going to support this, to see if we can mitigate the Pine Hill Station. But I see this as a long-term project. This could take us, unfortunately, as what we did with the schools. We didn't build all the new school facilities in 1 year. We did it in a long term, and we'll have to watch the bonds, the way things are now happening with the economy and everything. And we'll have to go with the advice of Ms. Enright and other people that know more about it. I don't even do the checkbook at home, so I can't tell you. But anyways, I made the money, the wife does, doling out, I stretched the line, she stretched the checkbook, you know what I mean? But we'll have to, just take this in little bites and try to get it, the important things and prioritize. Maybe we might be able to do a roof a year or something like that, and take a value. And I think what Director Cummings is saying, I'm very interested in, and I've said it for years from the beginning. Part of the fire department budget is going out and buying lawnmowers and everything else like that to take care of the grounds. And, plowing, and sometimes we need the help of DPW on some of the stations to get rid of the big pile of snow so that the drivers can see access in vacating the building and not cutting out in the middle of traffic. So, they need help with a lot of these things. So as we go in the future, we'll take the small bites, I'm hoping, and try to prioritize what we need to do. And we're going to look at you, Chief, to come up with your list of priorities, and we can mitigate that. And Chief Pouliot, please, take them to the former Crown Hill Station.
Probably doesn't look much different than.
Oh,
guys that live in there.
I had a mayor come in and showed him when I was captain of the facility, and he says, I'm sorry you guys have to live like this. And I'm going like, ugh, But you worked there, Chief Buxton, yeah, so those were the good days, So I'm glad we're on the right course, and I thank you for your presentation. I'll have to ask, what you presented on the screen, can we get a copy?
Yeah, I've asked
Yeah,
Director
okay.
Cummings,
All right, because then we'll put that as part of the
minutes.
the minutes and everything. Is everybody satisfied with their questions or comments? No, I think we're good, so we'll move along on the agenda.
Thank you.
Chief and company, thank you, and it was good seeing you guys again.
Thank you.
Yeah. We can probably go on while they're vacating.
Yeah.
They don't seem like to be a noisy group, so we can go on.
Communications? Yeah, do that.
When you guys heading back to Seattle?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow morning.
Oh, well, it's going to rain out tomorrow, just like at home. All righty, thank you again. All right, communications.
From Sam Durfee, Planning Manager, referral from the Board of Aldermen on resolutions R25-159, R25-160, R25-161, R25-166, and the amended petition for street discontinuance regarding a portion of Veterans Memorial Parkway.
Okay, there being no objection, I'll accept the communication and place it on file. Unfinished business,
There is none?
new business resolutions.
R25-156, authorizing the sale of tax deeded property located at 115-117 West Hollis Street. Mr. Chairman, I motion to recommend approval, final approval,
Final passage.
final passage.
Very good. Director, you can have a seat if you wish, or you're fine there at the Diaz.
I anticipate a more transient visit, but that's okay.
Well,
Mr. Chair, I'm joking. Mr. Chair, may I?
yes, you may, please.
Good evening. For the record, Matt Sullivan, Community Development Division Director for the City of Nashua. Here on behalf of R25-156, authorizing the sale of tax deeded property located at 115 through 117 West Hollis Street. Before I get into the substance of the legislation, which is albeit fairly brief in the number of words, I want to just note for the record that this address may be familiar to some of you sitting around the horseshoe this evening. This was actually part of a previous piece of legislation through the tax deeding process, but I'm going to give you a brief history and then talk about what this legislation does moving forward. The property itself, 115 through 117 West Hollis Street, is located on West Hollis Street. It's a 2-unit building currently with a parking area and a garage in the rear of the site. It's approximately 0.28, 0.29 acres in size, and was actually on April 21st of 2023 taken by the City of Nashua via the tax deeding process that I think you're all familiar with. Subsequently, as part of that process in September of 2023, via an auction process, or the city rather authorized an auction process, which is of course customary to these properties. Subsequently, on October 7th of 2023, the property was in fact auctioned, but over the course of the coming weeks and months, ultimately the buyer chose not to close on the property. As part of that, they actually forfeited a $10,000 deposit, but ultimately the property was not closed upon, and therefore the city has remained, or rather the property has remained in the city's care over the course of time since then. Subsequently, as part of what I would call strategic discussions between the city's land use leadership team and the tax collection leadership team, we had some conversations about this property in the context of the city's affordable housing and housing needs more generally. And admittedly, we've been having conversations in a variety of different ways around properties like this, particularly multifamily or duplex properties, that may, for one reason or another, be a small step forward or an incremental step forward in solving some of the city's affordable housing challenges and crisis. And particularly, we've looked at these properties in the context of a section of state statute that allows the city to dispose of properties through an alternative method if, in fact, disposition through an alternative method meets a public interest or a public purpose. And it's been our conversation internally, at least, and I think that's why we're here this evening, that solving or incrementally working towards bettering the city's affordable housing challenges is, in fact, a public purpose and in the public's interest. And therefore, we've brought forward the legislation tonight to actually, through an alternative disposition process, put 115, 117 West Hollis Street out through a request for proposal process. This will be familiar to you, in particular you, Alderman Thibodeau, going recently through, of course, the Elm Street process. This is a much smaller scale. This is a very small property. It's a 2-unit property. But ultimately, the goal is the same, and that is to put out an RFP, likely to a very small developer that owns properties of this size, or perhaps even an area nonprofit that works on affordable housing. We would solicit proposals into the city. There'd be a review team. We would ultimately go through the selection process. But the idea would, in fact, be to see an affordable housing proposal for this site at 150 and 117. Therefore, the legislation in front of you, just to overview, does a couple of different things. One, it authorizes the city to dispose of the property through an alternative method than is typically used, which is typically the sealed bid and auction process. In replacement, it allows us to go through an RFP process and put this property out to the public and development community to respond to. And then lastly, it of course authorizes the mayor to enter a purchase and sale negotiation and to ultimately sell the property to an affordable housing entity that will convert the property, whether through demolition of the current structure or redevelopment of the site, or redevelopment of the current structure that exists there. Again, this is all underpinned, and this is laid out in the legislation before you, by the idea that affordable housing and housing creation and affordable housing preservation is in the public's interest, and that's why we're bringing this forward to you this evening. Happy to answer any questions that you might have, but look forward to working on not only this property, but potentially other small-scale properties that are taken through the tax deeding process to hopefully better the city's efforts towards creating affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Clee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess the question that I have is, does this mean that this sale can happen without the city having to recoup the back taxes or any of the loss of cost of all of this? And the reason I'm asking about this is that for complete transparency, I will, I don't know if I had this conversation with you, or I know I had it with somebody within the city. I was approached, and I'm not going to say by who, by an entity that was asked if I would try to shepherd almost a donation of this property to an entity that wanted to build homes something similar to this. And in looking into this, I think I spoke to Ms. Enright, and you know, the whole process was this was not allowed, and I said it would be for the public good, and I kind of looked at that one particular process, and the whole thing was that no, the city had to recoup its and so on. So I kind of went through all this whole thing. The person said, oh no, you know, I'm willing to try to do money and so on. I'm going to be on, it was not a private person, it was an organization. So, but I don't want to give the name and so on.
Sure.
But, so that's why I'm asking this question, so.
Certainly, Mr. Chair, I'll respond to that if you're comfortable. So the statute contemplates a few different modifications to the rules, and I'll reference the two that you're referring to, Alderwoman Clee. One being the payment of back taxes and what's owed to the city, and the other being the idea of disposing of the property through a reasonable fair market value, right? That's the other contemplation of the statute. And like you've said, we have had inquiries from several entities interested in this property, whether for affordable housing, market rate housing, or even other uses. And so there's no secret that we've had those inquiries. What the use of an alternative process or disposal process does is it does modify, albeit indirectly, the fair market value piece of the statute. And what I mean by that is if a public purpose is identified, it's not held to necessarily the same standard when it comes to what a fair market value is. Now, here, the fair market value metric will be fair market value for an affordable housing development. And so we still satisfy that section of the statute. To my knowledge, and perhaps I should confirm this, and I guess I'll commit for the record that I will, to my knowledge, the need to, as far as back taxes being paid, that is not modified in any way by identifying an alternative disposal method. Those obligations still exist. Okay. That process still is in place. But what does change is the fair market value establishment that's outlined in statute. That changes sort of inherently by moving towards whether it's an affordable housing play or some other use that's identified as being a public benefit or in the public interest. Hopefully that answers your question.
Follow up?
So, please, correct me if I'm saying this. The audience that you're looking at kind of changes because you're changing the definition of fair market value. So prior to that, you were putting it out to the highest bidder. The city can only still can only accept a certain amount, and the remainder would have had to go to who you took it from.
That's absolutely
Now
correct.
what you're doing is you're changing the audience to whom you're selling it to because you changed the definition of fair market value. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, I'll respond. That is correct. One assumption I want to be careful that we don't
Okay.
make, which I've almost implied I'm making myself,
Yeah.
is that an affordable housing development of the site will absolutely undermine the market value. That's not necessarily the case. It is possible, of course, but ultimately there will be the same obligation to, if there are excess revenues as a result of the sale, that same obligation exists to dispose of back to the prior owner. I want to confirm all of this outside of this meeting because I do want to point out that there's a unique history and fact pattern for this property, having gone out to auction, having been entered into through a purchase and sale, but not ultimately closed. But I am fairly certain that all of the same provisions would apply, but I'll send a confirmatory answer back to this committee before this legislation returns to the full board. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman.
Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you. I just want to understand the process and what this resolution says. So you said it, now I processed it, now I'm going to spit it back to you, and I want to make sure that I understand it. The city owns this property through the tax deeding situation. There were back taxes, city took it over. Typically, that gets auctioned off, back taxes get paid, everything proceeds as normal. In this situation, the city is going to retain ownership of the property for now until we're going to put it out to RFQ for someone to develop it for affordable housing. Once that happens, at that point, the city will then sell the property to said contractor, and that money will come back to the city to satisfy back taxes. I know I'm simplifying it, but I want to make sure that I understand it.
I think perhaps I should let you speak to my legislation moving forward because I think that's a perfect summary.
Okay.
Yep. With the one exception being that it will be an RFP process rather than a quals process, but that is essentially what will happen here, yes.
Okay.
So you will retain ownership, RFP will be released, RFP will reflect the values contained within this resolution. There'll be a selection process of a preferred respondent, essentially.
Yeah.
Price will be negotiated. Ultimately, the sale will be processed, and then the customary process with the sale of any tax deeded property will then go into place as far as being paid back to the
All
city.
right. Can I have a follow-up?
Follow up?
Are you able to reveal what the back taxes are on this property?
Mr. Chair, I actually do not have that answer tonight. I'm happy to send it to the committee, perhaps as part of the response to Alderman Clee's question, but I do not know Alderman Sullivan.
Okay.
I can
All right.
confirm that.
That would be good if you could do that.
Absolutely.
But also keep in mind, where the person that bid it on the property defaulted and did not go to close, the initial deposit is in the custody of the city,
That
$10,000.
$10,000 went to the city, not to the auctioneer?
That is correct. Let me confirm that there wasn't a split on that, though. There may have been some split, so I can get that answer as well.
Yes.
Okay. All right, anybody else, questions? Okay, then I will call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Will the clerk please, next on the agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. R25-161, authorizing an amendment to Resolution R72-75, laying out common sewers as it pertains to the redevelopment of land in the Veterans Memorial Parkway redevelopment, VMPR, overlay district. Mr. Chairman, I recommend final passage of R25-161.
All right, you gentlemen, welcome. You might as well come up and sit down, because you're here for two, right?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so why don't you come in? Welcome to the Horseshoe.
Will Director Cummings be,
Happy to.
I don't know if he wants to associate with us with riffraff.
No, I was actually getting ready to just get up to the podium here, and I was.
At least they were nice.
So I was like, all right, I'm with you.
at least they were nice to Director Sullivan this time.
Director Sullivan could join us up here.
He looks especially sharp.
I learned sharing this week.
Alderwoman Clee, Director Sullivan certainly looks especially sharp tonight.
I know. I know. I don't blame him.
All right, since Director Cummings, you join us, do you want to
Yes.
segue into this?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, again, for the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. What we have before you is legislation amending some contracts and some prior agreements that we had previously approved, because what we are here tonight to talk about is the Mohawk Tannery redevelopment. This has been an ongoing project that's been near and dear to me over the years and to many others in the city. Thank you, Alderwoman Clee. You click. So with that being said, the project was a little bit waylaid. We were originally anticipating getting underway with remediation of the site last summer, last fall. That didn't necessarily come to fruition. Due to that, we had to rework some of the finer details of the project to be able to keep moving it forward. I will leave it to the development team here to speak in more detail of the technicalities, but I believe we are very close to getting this project underway. It is my understanding that we have received or are about to receive the final sign-off from EPA, DES for 100% design of the remediation. That is a critical milestone. Once we have that in hand, we really can be off to the races for the remediation, which I still hope will be this summer. But with that being said, I'll hand it off to Michael Devlin to my left here, who can walk you through the finer points of the legislation this evening.
Thank you, Director Cummings. Mr. Chair, members of the committee.
Can you please just state your name for transcription, please?
Yes, my name is Michael Devon. I represent Blaylock Holdings. I'm here with Attorney Westgate. Without Brad, this project would be lost. I personally would be lost. But greatly appreciative of his efforts and his colleagues' efforts. The Mohawk Tannery has been before this committee as well as the larger board a number of times. I'm thrilled to be able to report that we're rounding third base, so to speak. We received final comments on the 100% design from EPA and DES last week. We've done an analysis of those comments, and we anticipate filing the final 100% design on June 6th. This is a 2,400-page document that is certainly extensive, if not downright exhaustive, in terms of the level of detail that the engineering consultants have gone through to make sure that we remediate the site well and safely for the public health risk that it imposes. Great thanks to the city staff for getting us to this point in all of the dealings that we've had. I can't count the number of times I've had a 10:30 call or a weekend call from Director Cummings or Director Sullivan to make sure we talk about finer points of the Mohawk Tannery. The staff has truly been dedicated. As we all know, the Mohawk Tannery site sits along the Nashua River. Directly east is the downtown area. It's a great area for development. Unfortunately, it has been contaminated for a number of years. Things started to change for the site when Blaylock Holdings, ran by Bernie Plant at the time, reached a deal with the EPA to redevelop the site by first cleaning it up. The EPA has since increased its commitment to the project from $6 million to $9.5 million. That was approved by DOJ as well as upper levels of the US DOJ just recently, and it's currently in public comment due to end on June 11th. in order for us to have that agreement perfected and ready to go. The reason we've been at this now for a number of years, Director Cummings certainly well before me, it's a contaminated site. Sitting along the Nashua River are these two large lagoons of carcinogenic materials. Those lagoons sit within the 100-year floodplain. The tannery started in the 1920s. I wouldn't want to keep playing those odds if I was the city of Nashua. Throughout the site, there are also a number of scattered bits of the tannery waste, as well as a larger landfill here, which was on the Fimble Door property, as well as scattered asbestos throughout. The goal is to clean up the site, consolidate all the carcinogenic materials into a containment cell, elevate that containment cell over the 500-year floodplain line in order to further protect the site, put a permeable cap on top, and then make use of the site into the development that you have seen before you. The legislation that has gone before the larger board had various pieces to it, including a revised master site plan. That's not subject here tonight, but this depicts some of the changes that were before the board. Before the committee tonight are two pieces of legislation, R25-166. This legislation contemplates easements through the project site to the adjacent Tamposi property. One of the dealings that we had to do with the city was to lease the right-of-way parcel as such, lease the right-of-way parcel through the remediation. As such, we now have to have the city join in some of the agreements that we've made to the adjacent property, including an access and utility easement. To be clear, though, tonight we are asking the board to table this bit of legislation until the June 11th meeting of this committee. Reason being that we just received red line comments from counsel from the Tamposi family that owns the adjacent land, and we want to attend to those comments, route those red lines through Attorney Leonard, who's been intimately involved in this project, so that the city is accepting of those changes, and then bring that new version before this committee on the 11th, which we are already set to be before for a public hearing on a street discontinuance petition that we previously had.
166, this one here?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, ma'am. R25-161, we are asking this board to, or this committee to provide a favorable recommendation to the larger board. What this legislation contemplates is a existing sewer trunk line, which the city has, along the river, next to where the containment cell is. And there's a sewer siphon over here, as well as going further east. Amending the easement itself to allow us, Blaylock, to do work and install the necessary structures that we need for the containment cell along that easement that currently exists, and ensure that the city will follow certain repair protocols if they ever need to repair the sewer adjacent to the containment cell. Our consultants at Alien Aldridge put together a repair protocol, which obviously the city, when they put their sewer in, would not have known at the time because the design hadn't been designed for the containment cell. So our consultants put forth that protocol to city engineering staff, Engineer Hudson, and his team, and we agreed to what that protocol would entail. So this legislation just, again, reiterates that the city needs to follow certain protocols. And then ultimately, we're projected to close July 15th, subject to change. There are so many players involved in this project that that's the date we're projecting, but it is subject to change. Once we begin the remediation, it will be 2 years between remediation, sign off, and then start moving forward on the redevelopment project. And that completes the presentation for tonight.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from members of the board? Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. Regarding the 166, that was the one that you're requesting to table?
Yes, sir.
That had the red lines issue. Any, I don't know what you can reveal, what you can't, but have you taken a glance at the red lines? Anything that you see as troubling or maybe non-negotiable or anything, any landmines there that you see?
One of the beauties of this project is most people defer to Attorney Westgate in terms of the redlining and his knowledge base. So I have seen the red lines because Brad wrote them.
Okay.
But I'll let him answer that
Okay.
specific question if that's okay with Mr. Chair.
If I may, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
Thank you again for the record. Brad Westgate, lawyer with Weiner and Bennett, 402 Amherst Street here in Nashua. The red lines were creations that we made today. My colleague Barbara Halevy and I did as the initial draftspeople of the easement document based on a conversation we had with counsel for the Tamposi entities. Fundamentally, the red lines are to simplify a complex little aspect of this document that I initially drafted, which with some comment now having received from the Tamposi's counsel, I can see a way to simplify it. And also to indicate how we had to add the city as what I call an accommodation party to the easement. As Mr. Devlin noted, instead of acquiring fee simple full ownership of the 4.4 acres that's coming out of the Veterans Memorial Parkway right-of-way that's part of the site, we're going to lease it for a time frame. But because of the commitments to the Tamposis, both under our master development agreement and also the original legislation that contemplated ultimate redevelopment of the tannery site, we need to grant them these easements up front, if you will. So that necessitated some structural changes to the document, which are reflected in these red lines. I don't think any of what we've done is going to be a showstopper, both with the Tamposis and with city staff and Attorney Leonard. But I do have to walk through with the Tamposis those changes better, and also certainly bring city staff up to speed with why we've approached it the way we did.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And right now, we're on to R25-166, and I'll entertain by recommendation a motion to table. Alderman Clay.
Yes, R25-166, authorizing the city of Nashua to join in the granting of an easement for the benefit of MAP 62, Lot 100, and adjacent land in connection with the redevelopment of the former Mohawk Tannery site. Mr. Chairman, I recommend table to the next meeting of June 11th.
Okay. And any discussion on that?
Discussion on that, I tabled it.
No, I think you can have that.
No, not on
No,
tabling.
not on tabling.
No.
But I would like to say June 11th, I'll have to check with the administrative,
We do have one of those interim meetings,
yeah,
yeah.
the booking if it's available. So if you could check with Donna, I'll
I'll
have Donna
put
check with
June
you.
11th tentative to the
Yeah,
clerk.
Mr. Chair, just if I may, I believe that notice has already gone out for a public hearing for that night.
Oh,
because
okay.
There's a petition for a street discontinuance that we had to amend based on these changes.
well, if that's the case, that's beautiful. Okay, good.
Mr. Chair.
All right, I didn't want you to count on the 11th and then we get something awry. Okay, all right. The motion is to table. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye?
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, new business ordinances,
There is none?
petitions.
There is none.
We do have another item that is tabled, but it's not going to come off the table. Nobody's shown interest. And,
There's another one. We'll leave that one on the table.
well, yeah, it's petition for,
Yeah.
that's been tabled for a while there, too. So, general discussion? Yes, Alderman Thibodeau.
Just, I wasn't vocal on the first motions. I don't know if you had me as a yes. I was confused for a second on whether,
On
which
which-
one we were voting for. So I'm a yes on 161
Oh, okay,
and to table on 166. I got
Okay.
confused at which one we were.
okay.
You voted in the affirmative.
Correct.
Okay, and there's nobody here for public comment, and remarks by Alderman is the same as general discussion.
I agree. I get confused by those too.
Yeah, we're looking to
We're
modify
splitting
that.
hairs, Mike.
Yeah,
I know.
unless somebody has something they want to share.
I'm good.
Good.
I think we should get rid of general discussion and just go straight to
I would agree with that.
Yeah,
remarks by, I think
I'll
they're
make that
working on it.
motion.
Yeah.
all right, and so now I'll look to Alderman Cleave for the next motion.
Your favorite one.
Yes, indeedy.
I'd like to motion to adjourn.
Okay, the motion is to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye?
Opposed? Motion carries. And I'll declare the meeting closed at 8:50 PM.